All right, welcome everybody. Hello, welcome to episode 61 of the podcast. It has been, I don't know, a short minute since last time I hosted an episode. There's been something going on in the world, and didn't quite have my head together for doing podcast episodes as well. But I am super excited about being back. Thank you so much for coming back to listen. It's been amazing to see the number of people who have downloaded and listened to different podcast episodes, which ones are interesting, which ones people are choosing to listen to over the last 18 months, 2 years. So we are back with episode 61, and today I've got Christine Chessman with me today. She is a women's intuitive fitness coach and Pilates teacher, working in the non-diet space. So one of the reasons why I particularly wanted to talk to Christine today, and first, is because we're talking right at the beginning of January. And of course, life is full of diet culture, losing weight, trying to get, getting fit and healthy and things like that. And what I really wanted to talk about was what those things really mean, and what they mean to different people, and the sort of pitfalls and issues that we could have around that type of culture, and what Christine's experience of that is personally, but also with clients as well. So Christine, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I'm very excited to be invited, Kathryn.
Oh, good. All right. So tell me a little bit more about you and how you work now, and kind of how you came round to working the way that you do.
So I started off in IT. Yeah, well, okay. I'm not give it all, but I started off in IT and hated it, and then had the kids and decided a little career change might be in order. So I'm going to ignore the buzzing outside, which is Amazon, I'm sure. And yeah, so I decided I always enjoyed fitness, but I always enjoyed fitness from the perspective of the calorie burn and weight maintenance. And I felt I needed to exercise in order to feel okay about food. So I got into it, I think, with that mindset, the idea that I could actually do this for a living. I could exercise for a living. So that was probably in my early 30s. I'm now 45, and it's gone full circle. Sorry, it's a long answer to a convoluted answer to your question.
Yeah.
But I've sort of discovered what sounds very twee, but what joyful movement is, and actually moving your body to feel different in your body as opposed to look different. So I have managed most of the time to separate that weight loss and exercise. I've managed to untangle those, and I now exercise for the benefits it gives me physically in terms of my fitness levels, in terms of my strength, bone density, muscle mass, and how I feel. And that's what I bring to my clients. So it's I want them to feel good in their bodies as they are, without adding that component of weight loss as a goal.
Okay, so you said that you came round to it from a point of view of, I could get paid, or this could be a lifestyle for me of something that I already want to do, which is to exercise for weight loss or for sort of calorie control and things. So why was that your first impression of needing or wanting to do this and get into this, into training and things, and how did that change then? What came about for you? Where was this realization?
Now that's a very interesting question. Yeah. So I'm sure we'll head on to it, but I've had disordered eating throughout my life. I had an eating disorder as a teenager. And so for me, I've always had quite a disordered relationship with exercise as well, which I think is not often added to the conversation. And that's another reason that I feel so strongly about it. I think, we talk about diets a lot, but we don't talk about the fitness challenges and the pressure to work out in a certain way, and how damaging that can be to your relationship to how you move and to exercise. And I think how it changed was just meeting people and talking and learning. So I watched the film, which, you know, we'll talk about that maybe a bit more, but I watched the film which changed things completely for me. And I ended up hosting, I've done 2 joint hostings of the film. The film's called Embrace, and it's a documentary about one woman's journey to love her own body. And she goes around the world and interviews women about why they don't like their bodies. And it's just incredible. And I've hosted it now with my good friend, Claudine. And it just changed things. It gave me a hope that actually I could have a different mindset and I could feel differently about movement and my body. I didn't have to spend my whole life trying to control it and trying to bring that focus internally, that I could just actually change things up. So that was for me, that was a tipping point. There's been lots of little tiny points and lots of things, but that was the one thing I think that sticks out for me.
And so you mentioned that you had an eating disorder when you were younger. So was that anorexia?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about the sort of origins of that for you and how that led into exercise being the controlled thing in your life.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's so long ago and it still stirs up emotions in me, I would say, because I was at the age my daughter is now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I find so tricky. But I grew up in Belfast in the Troubles, and there was no control. There was nothing. Your life was constantly uncertain, unsure. You know, we grew up in a very difficult area because my dad was a vicar on the Shankill Road. I don't know if you've heard of it. And we were very much part of it and saw a lot of things kids probably shouldn't see at that age. And also my dad was a vicar and we were kind of put on a pedestal as kids. So you couldn't do anything wrong. You had to be perfect all the time. It always seems to come back to that. You couldn't control anything else in your life, but I thought I could control, you know, how I looked. And I always was teased because I have a long nose. Don't know if you've noticed. and actually now kids would tease me and I thought, well, I can't change my face, but I can change. It was as simple as that. I can't change that, but I can change this and I can control this as I thought. And that's what started. Now, I'm not saying that was the cause of it. So dieting doesn't necessarily cause eating disorders, but it can be a predictor and it can be a huge contributing factor to somebody who's susceptible to an eating disorder in the first place. So I just went on a diet and I just couldn't stop. And it went on for several years. And it was a really hard time. It was really, I look back on it and it makes me so sad. I feel I put my parents through quite a lot because it was hard. It was really hard. And I want to save, I mean, it sounds, that word save, I want to prevent women from spending their lives looking inward and worrying about how they appear to other people, because there's a different way. And I know that eating disorders, there's an awful lot wrapped up in that. And I'm not saying it's just body image at all, but there's a lot of disordered eating within our community, within the fitness community, which I think we need to look at.
And how was, I mean, I'd love to come on to in a minute because we're going to talk about intuitive eating, this difference between eating disorders and disordered eating. But how was your anorexia and the sort of realization of you having that illness? How was that received within the kind of your family and your community? And how did you manage to make steps to get on a kind of better path or a more healed path for you?
So I think one of my teachers in school actually pulled me aside and I had recognized that, you know, I'd lost a lot of weight and she was very worried about me, and then spoke to my parents. And then, you know, it was quite, I think by that stage, it was quite obvious. I had no energy. You know, my heart rate was ridiculously low, dangerously low. And, you know, I had to go to the hospital. I had to start going to the hospital every week to get weighed, get blood tests, and to this day, I can't get a blood test without fainting, because they had so much trouble taking blood from my arm because I was so cold all the time. And I just remember I think it's that sort of mental block from that time. But it was a horrible time. But I ended up seeing a counsellor and I was able to find my way back to a healthy weight. But, and this is why I talk about eating disorders and fitness industry and disordered eating so much, I spent the next 25 years in a disordered eating pattern, and everybody looked at me and thought I was recovered, and I ate healthily, and I looked a normal weight in inverted commas, but I really wasn't recovered. And it's that thing that I think people judge eating disorders by size often, and eating disorders do not discriminate. And because somebody's in a healthy, inverted commas, looking body or looks a certain way does not mean they're not struggling. Underneath that.
So did you feel like you were still having the same mindset issues even after the point at which it seemed like you were sort of acceptable to the people around you and society and things? You were still actually also looking at food and thinking, how much exercise, or do I deserve that, or should I have that food?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can say lots of controversial things. So I went into healthy eating. So I think I struggled a bit with binge eating and lots of other things along the way. But I moved into healthy eating, and I was seen as the healthy person. Oh, Christine won't eat that. She's really good. She doesn't eat that. She's good. And I think I then went into orthorexia in my late 30s, and not that long ago, well, quite a few years ago, which orthorexia is the clean eating and being obsessed with eating clean. So I would only eat sort of coconut oil, goji berries. It had to be clean. It couldn't be anything added or any, and I think that was also quite a disordered pattern of eating. And I went from one to the other, and it was always about me. I was the one who ate healthily, and I had a certain body weight, and that's how people saw me. And I think I've fought my body the whole time. I'm in a straight size now. I have an incredible privilege, and I would never want to say that I know what it's like to be in a larger body, but I was in a very small body for most of my 30s. And that was not, I fought my body to stay in that size of a body, and that's not what my body wanted.
No. Okay. So, I remember from myself pre-kids, and when my husband, who is, when both of us were starting to sort of understand and learn more about food and nutrition, lifestyle and things like that, had this kind of like, oh my God, there's this whole, you can do stuff for your body and your brain and for helping you to recover and stuff like that. Like, it was the whole encompassing thing. But it meant that it then suddenly made me hyper aware of everything that I was eating, having never been somebody who was particularly bothered about it. I mean, I was just the sort of typical early 20s person who I could pretty much eat most stuff. I could, and it seemed to make any difference. It also didn't bother me. But I then had this realization that there's this difference between some types of food and another type of food, and I should be, like you said, always cooking with coconut oil, or I will never touch anything that has been cooked in sunflower oil, and I can have these 5 pound packet crisps because they've been cooked in whatever, and I've got them from Whole Foods rather than Walker's or whatever, or a burger from this place that's like 100% grass-fed, blah 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 blah, is completely different to the sort of the Five Guys burgers or the McDonald's or whatever. And so I became completely obsessed with exactly what it was I was putting in, and it was about the ingredients and about the like you said, the cleanness of what I was eating. And like you said, and I think this, and it's only recently that I came around to, once I started understanding more about intuitive eating, came around to this idea that actually it's a disordered eating pattern.
Yes.
Every time you look at a piece of food, is like, oh, where has this been? Where has that been? Oh, I can't have normal cheese. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of the ridiculous things that I used to do. And
the E numbers in food, and you can
yeah,
have added sugar or, you know, anything.
yeah, added sugar, exactly. Oh no, I can't eat that cereal that somebody's just put in the table when I'm staying at a friend's house or something like that. I'd like, you know, oh, I'll don't worry, I'll just have some fruit or some yogurt, or I'll try and like pick out bits and pieces of things that were deemed to me to be acceptable, rather than just, thank you so much for providing me with food and I'm going to eat this, you know. So tell us a little bit more, or let's discuss a little bit more about the difference between an eating disorder and a disordered eating pattern. I mean, we've kind of just gone through that, but I think it's something, you know, like I said, it's something that I've only come to understand when I've understood more about intuitive eating, but it's such an incredible, it's one of those distinctions that made me just go, oh my God, right, I see.
I think it's, you know, I think this is quite a tricky, there's a tricky balance here, because actually orthorexia, which is the obsession with the clean eating, is not yet in the DSM, which is the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, which basically deems whether, so anorexia, bulimia, etc., it sort of lists in the mental illnesses which eating disorders are kind of seen, recognized worldwide. But orthorexia will be added, so it's due to be added. And I think that is quite key to why I do what I do, because it is masquerading in the diet industry and the fitness industry as being healthy, and it is actually an eating disorder. So you were talking about what you described. You can have disordered eating, but disordered eating patterns can develop into an eating disorder, and I think that's what's quite important to realize. So I probably had a fairly active eating disorder throughout my 30s, which was orthorexia, which was that obsession with eating in a certain way and only being healthy and not eating anything that wasn't healthy. It really depends on how it affects your life.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about how somebody might be able to, somebody listening to this might listen to it and go, is that what I do? I don't know. Like, how do I know when it's gone to a point at which I really ought to have a bit of a word with myself or seek help?
I think it is, I mean, it's very individual, and I think if you begin to have fear around food, and you won't go to certain social occasions, or you bring your own food places. Now, I'm not saying that if you have allergies, if you have any intolerances, that's a completely different issue if there's a medical reason. But I used to go away for weekends with friends and bring my own, as we were talking about just now, bring my own cereal, because I knew that there was no added sugar, there was no added ingredients, and I used to bring it with me, and I'd be sitting with them and they'd be having muesli and breakfast from the hotel, and I would be pouring my own into a bowl. And that's because I was scared to eat. I was worrying about what it would do to my skin or my health or my weight, and it's when it gets to a point where you shy away from social occasions, when you worry about eating food, when you dread going to dinner with a friend in case you have to eat something that is outside of your comfort zone. I think if it starts impacting you in that way, and you begin thinking about it, you know, you're constantly thinking about food, I think that's a point when it's good to reach out and talk to somebody.
And I think the distinction that is really important that you made there was about your reason, your sort of justification for it was, to yourself, was what it was going to do to your skin, your weight, or something like that. So there's that, why are you selecting that food? Is it because that food is helping your body to function well for the things that you need? Like, you know, you're doing lots of strength work at the moment, and you know you need to add more protein in order to help your muscles work well and for you to recover well.
Yes.
Or are you doing that because you're worried that you're going to put on weight, or your skin's going to look bad, or it's kind of like an external thing Yeah, it's just really interesting when you said that. It just instantly made me think about the mindset work that I do about people, with women, about looking at the reason why underneath it all.
Yeah.
Where's it really coming from? What does that mean to you? Okay, what does that mean to you? All right, what does that mean to you? You know, it's like, right, why are you bringing your own cereal? Is it just because because you have a fairly tuned diet and it's just easier this way? I don't know, whatever it is. Okay, why does that mean something to you? Well, because otherwise I'm then going to have to exercise more if I've had. Okay, so then we need to kind of take a look at that, because could you let it go? How would that feel? Like, if you didn't bring your cereal that day to that weekend away, how would that feel if you didn't do that? Would you then feel like you had less control, or that you needed to compensate somehow in another way?
Yeah. Now, I absolutely agree with you. There is that distinction. Certainly from my perspective, it was more from that external validation that I was taking, etc. But I do think you can also really believe that food is medicine. Like, this is a very controversial topic, but somebody that I follow is Joshua Woolrich on Instagram, and he wrote a book called Food is Not Medicine. And I think food can definitely support us, and especially, as you're saying, when you're doing strength training, extra protein is great, and you need to fuel your workouts. You absolutely do. But I think his point was really our health. We cannot control our health. Nutrition can help, but actually nutrition's probably 30% less than 30% contributing factor to our health. And there's so many other things that contribute to our health that we cannot control. And I think it's putting all, so that's maybe another podcast, Kathryn. But I think you can definitely have disordered patterns of eating when you're worrying about your health as well. Now, this is if you are, you don't have any other issues going on where you have to really be careful.
Yeah. Okay. And so then I suppose then the next question might be, all right, how do we distinguish then between somebody who is eating like the examples that we've given, that you're sort of controlling your food in order that you have control, that externally you feel acceptable, and you're doing it in order that you can keep a balance on the things that you can control in life? What about somebody in comparison who generally eats quite a lot of crap, and they eat a lot of biscuits, and they eat a lot of takeaways, and they skip breakfast most days, and they drink a few pints and a few bottles of wine every week and things like that, and they come to the conclusion, I think I kind of need to sort my shit out a little bit, and then we get to this point in New Year where some of the kind of influency type people are going, New Year, new you, diet this, buy my online course to lose 20 pounds in a week, or whatever, all of that stuff. Look, I did it, so can you, etc., etc. And then other people are saying, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to lose any weight. You don't need to be acceptable. You don't need to shrink yourself and stuff like that. But there's a person standing in the middle of this going, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm completely happy with myself right now.
Yeah.
I feel like I deserve to feel healthier, and I know there's things that I could do to make a difference. So how does somebody navigate like both of that messaging, but also the things that the behaviors that they take on, and the sort of the things that they change about the way that they eat?
So I mean, I think that's a really good point to raise, because I think, especially if you work in the non-diet space, people just think, one of my clients actually said to me, she's like, oh, I love your approach. You just don't give a monkeys. Sorry, I swear I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine.
So she said, you don't give a shit, do you? And I'm like, no. That's, I mean, And the whole premise of the intuitive eating is that you're stripping away the diet mentality so that you can build a better relationship with food, and you can work out what foods make you feel good and give you energy and make you, so you're not actively saying do not eat foods that feel good in your body. You're saying the opposite. You're saying repair that relationship. First of all, get rid of the diet mentality, and then you can start looking at that gentle nutrition and adding things in and eating for that. And I think nutrition is very important and can definitely help and support a healthy lifestyle, but it's the weight loss aspect is problematic because intentional weight loss, we all know dieting does not work in the long term. So it's got a 95 to 98% failure rate. Dieting does work in the short term, absolutely. But the weight cycling that most of us do, which is that up and down, is actually quite detrimental to our health. And so the January kind of promise of fast results, you probably will lose weight quite quickly, but it's that sustainability that you're looking for. So I would always say to clients, there's nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight. I'm not going to, I've spent my whole life trying to maintain weight, so I'm not going to judge anybody ever about that. But weight loss is not a behavior. So have a look at some behaviors. So weight loss might be a byproduct of healthy behaviors that you adopt. It might not. So, and I think that's what's more important, is it's sort of introducing, if you want to introduce a bit more movement into your life, if you want to feel more energetic, if you want to feel less sluggish, those are all absolutely valid. And you can very much start to address those through movement, through adding in more vegetables, but it's that crash diet restriction, that's the only way forward, I think, is what I find so problematic with the messaging, because people are trying to benefit very obviously off our feeling like rubbish in January. Yes. And we're feeling a bit low, we're feeling a bit vulnerable, and we just want to feel better about ourselves. So we're given this promise of results, again in inverted commas, and I think it's misleading. And I think it doesn't work in the long term, and it leads people down a very dangerous path, I think.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. And I think the difficulty all of us, many people come to, is that they get to this point in the year and they've had a great time in December. Okay, maybe not this December or the previous December, outside of COVID times. You've had a great December, like really enjoyed yourself and stuff like that. And then you're kind of like, do you know what? I need to stop kind of like drinking so regularly, or just randomly eating crap for no particular reason, or, eating a box of celebrations before 9 o'clock in the morning or something. But then there's that real, like, I promise I'm not dieting. I'm not trying to yo-yo, but then, there's this person. So I might as well just get that, because that's kind of really what I want to do. And then it's being torn between those two trains of thought. And because the way that we've all grown up is diet, lose weight, clothes look better on smaller sized bodies, the only people that exercise and look great in leggings are women who are a size 6, 8, whatever it might be. Runners are only people who are bouncy and have tight abs and like perky bottoms and stuff like that. So, because we've all grown up in that, and we have this it's just an innate, it's just ticking away back there in the back of our heads that we think that that's the way things are.
Yeah.
That prevails rather than that sense of like, maybe Weight Watchers isn't going to be the right thing, or that $29.99 online course that the Love Island celebrity has just popped out, or something like that. We don't kind of go, many people don't go, this is probably not the most sustainable thing, even though most of those people probably do know that it's not going to be sustainable. But because we have grown up and we are in the culture that we are in, it just jumps in ahead. It's just like, okay, fine, I'll buy that thing, because it's got to do something. I mean, look at her.
Yeah. And
Yeah. So
I find that really sad, isn't it? I mean, I find it really sad that we've all been conditioned that way. But how sad is that people who are in, people feel wrong in their bodies. And, I think body diversity exists, it is real. And we are not all going to be a size 8, 6, whatever size it might be naturally. And that's certainly not for me either. And it's that naturally what body shape your body wants to be when it is healthy and functioning and thriving might be very different from the ideal that we're presented with. And then you simply feel wrong for existing in the body that you were healthy and happy in. And that's what makes me so sad.
Yeah.
You spend your life fighting, because some people genetically are small in smaller bodies, and that's that for them is the perfect size.
Yeah.
Whereas not everybody is the same, and they might be thriving 4 sizes higher, 5 sizes. So everybody is completely different. And I think that's a narrative that I want to start getting out there and just changing, because we're not all supposed to be a size 6, size 8, size 8. We're all different. We all have different health histories. We all are very different bodies. We all have very different genetics. We can't all expect to look like what society at this current point in time dictates as our ideal look. And I think you're absolutely right. It is ingrained, it is conditioned. And I would never say that I don't have thoughts about dropping weight and looking thinner. Absolutely I do, but now I know what to do with them.
Yeah. So what do you do? Because I think that's a really distinctive point that I think a lot of people might who I speak to kind of like, oh, well, you don't have an issue with it. And I'm like, no, I live in this culture. Like, yeah. I see both of my kids growing up into a culture of the advertising that they receive. And I'm really aware of that. I see what I see when I'm choosing a new pair of leggings or, something on social media or something like that somehow comes into my feed. And I know what my brain goes to, which is, she does look bloody good in those leggings, and she is at least 2 sizes smaller than me. So like for you, what's your personal experience of that being in that sort of culture, and what do you do when you have those thoughts or see that?
So there's lots of different things that I do now. That diversify your feed. Detox first of all, and then diversify. So there was a study done a couple of years ago which showed that you will prefer whatever image you see most. So I think they did it on 8-year-old girls, and they showed them all these pictures, and it's the picture that you see most you will think is the most. And most pictures we see are white, blonde, skinny women. So that's what we think is beautiful, and that's what we deem beautiful. And if we were presented with different images, we might start thinking, oh, that's beautiful. Oh, she looks great. And that, rather than just thinking that is the only body shape that exists and that we should look like. So I have very much detoxed my feed and diversified my feed. And that's a game changer, because the messages that are coming at you are much less, just that one sort of ideal. I think that's really key, because but also trying to open your eyes. So I also think looking at movies from a different perspective, looking at and being a little bit cynical. The fact is that most of the actors in Hollywood are straight size, very slim, very toned, very kind of striated muscle, very much have a certain look. And it's getting that critical eye and realizing that we are living in diet culture and it is all around us. And being able to see that, once you see things, you can't unsee them. So once you see the advertising campaigns that are preying on your insecurities, you can't then think, oh, that's fine. They want my money to, cure my cellulite, when it's actually a normal bodily attribute that nobody ever worried about before it was created as a problem in 1976 or whatever it was. People used to just have cellulite and get on with their lives and not even think about it until somebody announced it was a problem. And it's things like that. It's sort of getting a little bit angry at what we, especially as women, are forced to undergo, when we should be changing the world and following our passions and, using our talents and our gifts rather than sort of turning that lens internal and critiquing ourselves.
Yeah. And the amount of energy that is spent, and particularly at this time of year, and then in the reverse, as you get towards like celebration times, like during the summer and in the Christmas holiday season and things like that, the amount of energy that's then spent on, oh my God, my beach body, and oh my God, am I going to fit into that dress? Imagine if actually all you did was put the dress on and then thought about what scintillating conversation can I strike up at this party, or, keeping up to date on, I don't know, something political or historical or something like that, then you'd be making your contribution in a completely different way, rather than somebody just going, well, you look pretty fine in that dress, and you're like, thank you, I have spent an awful lot of energy trying to actually fit into it, dieting, you wouldn't believe what I've been through, I've got like Spanx up to here, scaffolding all over the place, and it's actually taking up an awful lot just for me to be standing, let alone breathing, and I can't eat anything.
Exactly. There's a great quote in a book, I think by Sarah Pascoe, called Animal. She's a comedic actress.
Yes.
And she's like, half the population, instead of changing the world, we're cowering on our bathroom floors, just pummeling our cellulite. We're all kind of just hovering in the bathroom, just like, rather than being out there and changing the world, because that is how it's making us feel smaller. We're, unless we conform to an ideal, we don't quite fit in. And I think I've just lived that for too many years, and I see it through the eyes of my daughters now, and I think that's really been a wake-up call for me, because I do not want them to ever feel less than because of the bodies that they're in.
So before we talk about kids specifically, because I definitely want to get onto that, what about tell us a little bit more about exactly what intuitive eating is. So I know you're training to be an intuitive eating counsellor at the moment. Tell us what intuitive eating actually is. You've done a little bit of that already, but then also, okay, if we start talking about the kids as well, and you mentioned that your daughter is the same age as when your anorexia started, how are you helping her to not have that influence, or to understand that influence of the sort of diet culture and what she could be thinking?
Yeah, so my kids they're so bored of it, because I just talk about I talk about sort of accepting bodies all the time, and just, I'm always saying, oh, that film only has thin white women in it, and I do drone on quite a lot, but intuitive eating, it gets a bad rep, and a lot of people think you're in some sort of cult. It's like, oh, I eat intuitively. So it is not just eat all the donuts all the time.
Yeah.
Which, it gets a rap for, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's about making that distinction, first of all, that there's no good and bad food. And I think that is very hard, because we always say, who doesn't say it? Oh, I'm going to be good today. I'm not going to have a cake. I'm going to be, I've been really good. I've had, so you very much, that's in all of our language. We all use it all the time. And school teachers use it, and I've been told my daughter couldn't have I think this homemade cake in her lunchbox because it wasn't healthy, and it was something that, and it's things like that they get taught from a very young age. They shouldn't have that. That's wrong. That's unhealthy. That's bad. So it's kind of unpacking that's really hard. But intuitive eating in its essence is basically eating in a way that makes you feel good, and tuning into your body's actual physical cues, rather than suppressing your hunger because you want to lose weight and you want to look a certain way. It's actually going, oh, I'm quite hungry. I really need to eat this. And then sort of thinking when you're full, and it's thinking when you're hungry, when you're full. So it's tuning back in, it's respecting your body, it's feeding it regularly, and getting back to a place of trust.
Yeah.
Because I think many of us just eat according to what we think we should eat.
Yes.
Rather than what our body actually needs or wants.
And I think we also have become very, and I think this comes around when I started realizing this about intuitive eating. I realized it has actually been something that I've been talking about around movement.
Yeah.
And also because my husband's a sleep doctor, with him talking about that around sleep. And your sort of energy and productivity and things like that. You know, actually what, and you know, now that we, and as we're coming on to talk about children as well, one thing that we really do with our kids is tell them what they need or should be doing, rather than allow them to have the autonomy over what they should be doing. And as a mother, I know that, oh my God, I battle with that so hard, because God, it's a damn sight easier just telling them to go to the toilet and to eat the food now, but not later, and, you know, things like that. But when we, I mean, if I just took it from a pelvic floor point of view, if we're telling our kids to go to the toilet when we tell them to, even if they don't need it, they stop trusting their bladder for the signals that their bladder needs to give them. So if we allow them the autonomy to stop, check in with themselves and go, do I need the toilet? No, you need to trust them so that they learn to trust their own body. And that's what you're saying about intuitive eating as well, isn't it?
It's really interesting because Evelyn Tribole uses that analogy. So Evelyn Tribole created intuitive eating along with Elise Resch in 1995. So it's been going for quite a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, and she uses that, you know, the bodily cue. Like if you need a wee, if you really are desperate for the toilet, you're not going to go, no, I'm not going to have a wee. I'm going to wait until later. You know, you're actually going to listen to your body. And whereas if you're desperately hungry and you're following this, you know, however many calories a day plan, you're like, no, I'm going to have a Diet Coke. I'm going to have a coffee. I'm going to ignore what my body actually wants. And I think that's what we've all done for so long. I've done it for as long as I can remember. And I think it's a different conversation with kids because I think I did it, I say wrongly, you can't do intuitive eating wrong, but I certainly didn't start intuitive eating until a couple of years ago, or going down that path. So I always forced my kids to finish their food. And I would say, if you don't eat your vegetables, you don't get pudding. If you don't finish your dinner, you don't get pudding, because that is the reward for eating the good stuff. You get the bad. And that's what I've said to them since they were babies. And now I take a very different approach. And if they don't finish, that's fine. They still can eat pudding if they want, absolutely fine. It's sometimes really hard. I want to say, but just
really
eat the vegetable.
Hard.
Please just eat the vegetable. But I'm trying to, I do say things like, so you'll notice, I say, you know, in the morning, I like to eat oats because it fills me up, gives me energy. Whereas if you eat your Rice Krispies, you're going to feel really hungry by about 10 o'clock. So I try and add little things like that in and just encourage them to sort of think, did they have energy today? Were they feeling rough? You know, maybe they could try this instead, or just try and get them to listen to their bodies. But it is really hard. Because the kids now go, oh, can I have this chocolate? And I'm like, no. Yeah. But it's I'm trying to help them to see how they feel in their bodies, which is not something that I ever thought about until a few years ago, really.
No, and I think, you know, when I started thinking about it, I realized that actually a lot of the things that I was saying was because of the things that my mum said to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, how old am I? 44. They're about to be 44 in a couple of months. And, you know, so we're the same age. When you grew up in the 80s, it was there's starving children in Africa.
Yes.
You eat all your food and my God, don't go anywhere near that butter. It's margarine only sort of stuff, you know, sugar-free, everything, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, my mum, and this is this is absolutely no criticism of people who grew up or were parenting in that period of time. This is just the way that the language was. And that because we didn't have social media then, there was very little questioning of whether or not things that were being said were accurate, or where did they come from, but hang on, we've been eating butter for like 10,000 years, why would, or whatever, since we've been able to churn it, why would now it be evil in comparison to this man-made thing that we have? So there was very little questioning in the same way that we can now. But you know, I listen to the things that my mum will say things to my kids like, eat another 2 spoonfuls for me. And I'm just like,
used to do all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And we and you know, and then I used to say that, and then I had to stop myself, and then I was like, oh my God, but you know, they've told me how starving they are, and they've sat down eating one spoon and then don't want to eat anymore, and I can't just throw it away, and such a waste, you know. And then and so anybody listening to this just thinking, what the hell are you talking about? There's no way I can let my child eat quarter of their meal and then they can still choose to have pudding. I totally feel for you. It is really hard, but I'm hoping that what you can hear is some level of kind of like, well, yes, it would be interesting to know that my kids could grow up with having a more balanced relationship with food. So there isn't good food, bad food, healthy food, unhealthy food. It's just food. And they just eat what's right for them.
I think there is a book out there called Raising Intuitive Eaters, and certainly I came quite late to the party, so my kids were 11 and 9 by the time I tried to change the way that I have always.
By the way, kids, we're going to completely change our conversation about food. What?
And my other half is still in the old camp, so that's really tough. So he'll come in and go, finish your plate, you're not and I'm like, no.
We don't do that any longer.
But it's absolute mixed messaging all around. But I just want to, I've said to the kids very openly, I've said, I used to make you finish your dinner even though you were full. And I'm really sorry for that. And it's something that I've learned. But it's really hard. What I've noticed is my brother's just had a baby recently, and the baby eats. So she's now weaning, she's eating food. Babies will eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full. So we were all intuitive eaters at some point. So babies will, no, I don't want it anymore, because they're done. And at some point, the culture we live in drummed that out of us. No, don't listen to your body, listen to us. You want to look like this, you want to be like this, so stop. And it's getting that trust back with your body that is really hard. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it.
And so what do you what are the sort of the conversations, the things that come up in your head, and how do you deal with that?
So for me, I've just started, the intuitive eating is something that they say is a lifelong process, as in you just work on it all the time. That sounds like arduous. Food becomes more enjoyable, and it takes time. And this is not the easy sell. It's not a diet. It's not an easy sell.
It's not sexy, is it? No, it's not something sexy. You could sell an online course for $29.99 and sell 1 million copies of a DVD for.
Well, you know what? Some people are now. They're fed up with dieting. They just don't want to do it anymore. And they are coming around to that non-diet approach. But one thing I have to say, Kathryn, and I have to call them out, is that Noom, and I don't want to, Noom have bought the Google ads for intuitive eating so that they appear at the top of the list for intuitive eating. And they are not intuitive eating. They're calorie restrictive diet. And it is the guys who actually came up with the intuitive eating framework are outraged by this, because it's coming up as intuitive eating. So anybody who's fed up with diets will click on Noom and go back on a diet. And I think that's very misleading marketing. And I think that's and I think then the problem is, and I had this conversation with somebody about supplements the other day, as she was saying, I just went to Holland and Barrett and got some whatever vitamin D tablets, and I was like, okay, well, let's just talk a little bit about the disparity between some supplements and some others, and things that you don't need and things that you do and stuff that you can get from other places. And she was like, oh my God, it's a bloody minefield. How am I, somebody who does nothing to do with fitness, diet, exercise, all the rest of it, I have a full-time job and kids and all the rest of it that has got nothing to do with any of this. How am I supposed to find the difference between what would work well for me and what wouldn't? So, if somebody's going very genuinely having a need for something that they've heard of, that they're like, this seems like the most sensible approach to me and something that I could really work with. So intuitive eating seems like the right way to go. And then they get moved into a different conversation or a different pattern, and they're thinking, I thought it was this, and actually, it seems like it's exactly the same as all the other diets that I've been on. It's so hard, and you're right, it's so misleading.
you know, how on earth is anyone supposed to find their way around it?
So the basic thing is that intuitive eating is not about intentional weight loss. It is not about calorie restriction. It is not about any of that. So anything that's saying restrict your calories, anything that's promising weight loss, anything that is not intuitive eating. So intuitive eating, they basically say your weight, you may gain weight, you may lose weight. That is entirely up to your body and how it settles and how it finds. But the idea with intuitive eating is that your body will find its natural, its happy weight, and you will actually find, because you're actually listening to it and trying to tune in, which I think with movement, I think especially with Pilates as well, I think if you tune into your body with movement, if you're absolutely shattered and exhausted, but force yourself anyway to do that punishing workout, you're not going to feel better afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's about,
exactly.
You know, I think if you're thinking about how you feel, you can never go wrong. So it's about how you feel in your body when you eat something, when you do a workout, that's kind of what I'm just trying to simplify it as. So it's, how does that actually feel? And just taking a second to tune in, which is very hard to do.
It's really hard when we don't have any, you know, we have very little tools for being trusting of ourselves. We have so much we're told to do. We are structured, school, you know, the expectations in society, particularly if you grew up, for example, in a religious household or a political, you know, particularly, you know, dividedly political, or a specific culture or something like that. Those expectations on us, they are set in, that's your bedrock. And if you, you know, going anything around that, it's not from your own personal intuition. You are told that you are going to be the good girl, a nice girl, a small person, the clever one, the sporty one, the whatever, you know, those expectations that you have. And then your own intuition is that what that person expects of me? Not, is that what I need? Or exactly. Is that authentic? And does that express myself towards my best values? We've lost, you know, mainly we are, find that very hard, I think. I found Glennon Doyle's book Untamed, which I know you've read as well, you know, just amazing for that kind of like untangling of all of the things that kind of, particularly for women, you know, really kind of bind us into expectations.
So I think she has changed the world for so many women. I think she's done a beautiful job, and she has a podcast which I'm listening to at the minute, We Can Do Hard Things. And there's one episode called Bodies, which is incredible. And she just talks about your body not being the painting, it's the paintbrush that you use to accomplish what you need to do.
That's beautiful.
And it's she's just an orator. I mean, she is beautifully, lyrically beautiful. It's written beautifully, but the whole podcast is sort of her experience with her daughters going to a doctor's office, and he telling her that one of her daughters doesn't need to worry, but the other one could, because of the size of their bodies. And she was just outraged at this. And it's the whole idea that actually, as we were saying, bodies are different, and that, you know, and that one of her daughters suddenly felt wrong in her body, and the other daughter, oh yeah, I'm sure you're healthy because you look like that. And it was just unpacking that, and she does it so beautifully and so well. But and she has her own struggles, which she's very open about. But it just, that episode is a corker.
I will listen to that, because honestly I've read Untamed twice now, and if I see her on a podcast with somebody interesting, I always love to dip back into it, because it just reminds me again to not let go of that consciousness of where we're, you know, the where we're being held back, and the effect of that. And especially when we come to talking about our kids, our daughters specifically, but I have a son and a daughter, and when I look at when I look at it in relation to my daughter, that's one thing. But when I look at it in relation to what my son would expect from women, you know, whether or not he's straight and we're talking about you know, an intimate relationship with a woman, but there's also like the general expectation of women in society. What does he expect them all to be, all the women around him? Is he, because of the messaging that he's seeing, expecting them to be nice and spend time and energy and money on what they look like, to be thin, to have luscious hair, to not sweat, to you know, like all of that stuff? I mean, in this household, mainly because just the way that his older sister is, he's seeing a completely different thing. But if she was sort of more naturally kind of like diminutive, and I'm gonna say girly, but obviously that's not what I mean, because I don't mean girly only means you know, somebody who wears pink and doesn't do very much and eats very little and is very quiet. That's not what I mean. But his old, like his my daughter is 100% not. She's like a bull in a china shop, and you know, she's big, and she loves the fact that she's big because it means that she's strong and she's fast and things like that. So he's like, from her, he's not going to get that expectation. But when I see like other of his school friends, you know, that they have just a 2-boy household, you know, two brothers, siblings, they definitely have an expectation in a different way of girls around them. You know, they expect girls not to be able to do something faster than them or bigger than them or better than them or something like that. But it's almost like it's not because their mothers have done anything different. It's just is. It's just the way it is. And when I look at that, I'm like, oh God, you know, not only have the women got to be, but it actually has to so come from how we teach our sons.
100%. And it's interesting because diet culture, there's a saying that it's the sea we swim in, it's the air we breathe. It is everywhere, and men are not unaffected by it either.
No, exactly.
But I recently started, as we've talked about, the strength training, and I spoke to my PT in the gym, and he said that he is seeing a slight change, and he's seeing more women start to come in and want to be strong and lift weights and do strength training, which is a little shift. And I think there's some momentum that way, that women want to not just, and that's what I loved about strength training. It is the absolute opposite of what I've done with exercise throughout since I was a child. It is, you're not training to shrink your body. Now, your body might not necessarily get bigger, but you are not training to shrink. You are training to get strong. And that's an entirely different thing. And you were eating food to fuel your lifts and your workouts rather than using exercise to burn off the food that you ate. So it isn't just that 100, you know, you're literally going 180, and it's just so refreshing. And I think it's really good for the men in the gym to see the women lifting the weights as well, as you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if it's coming at this time of year when men might feel, and actually I think a lot of men walk into a gym and feel uncomfortable because they're not that, you know, like totally buff, like taking photos of themselves in front of the mirror and stuff like that. And they feel like, actually, if there's more balance from what they see with body diversity of all the different people, as well as balances of gender, balances of appearance, and balances of progress and things as well, I think it makes everybody stop feeling that they shouldn't be there, because then you see that actually everyone's there, so that's fine. Okay, well, thank you. I think that's a really great place to finish on, because I think the empowerment of strength is something that is a really nice roundup to, you know, where you've got through in your sort of your story, and you know, not to be trite, your journey through.
It's so funny. I just don't like saying that word, but I use it all the time. I know. It's a good word.
I'm really X factor about the whole thing, but it is a journey. All right. Thank you so much, Christine. I really love this chat. I know we've covered lots of different things, and there's lots of things that people can uncover some more about. Obviously, I'm going to put everything in the show notes so they'll be able to find you and your social feeds. and also more information about intuitive eating and some of the books that you've mentioned as well, and the podcast that we've talked about. So everything will be in the show notes, so you'll be able to connect with all of those things really easily. They're all links that you can just go ahead and click on. But thank you so much for your time. It's really generous of you.
Thank you, Kathryn. I've loved it. I'm a bit of a talker. I could go on forever.
Yeah, right, exactly. I've got to go and pick up my kids, and I'm still like, oh, I'm sure he'll be all right just staying around. I've been talking to somebody very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathryn.